difficult decision in the second choice of Mordin's maze, the knight finally chose a path. And along this path, he came along the third choice of Mordin's maze. Interestingly enough, this time, the road forked into two paths, and each one of these paths had a sign in front of them. The first path had a sign that said, "These signs are both false." And the second path had a sign that said, "This is the way to go." Now the knight was told that only one of these signs is correct, and the other sign is incorrect. So which path did the knight take? First, let's start by labeling what we know. Let's call this first sign, sign A. And let's call this second sign, sign B. So sign A reads, "These signs are both false." And sign B reads, "This is the way to go." Now, to make this a little easier to understand, let's organize our information. We can do that using this table. This column is for sign A, and this column is for sign B. Now keep in mind, the knight was told only one of these signs is correct, and the other sign is incorrect. So how many options are there? Let's think about it. We can assume sign A to be correct. And if sign A is correct, that means sign B is incorrect. This gives us one option. Now let's look at another option. Let's assume sign B is correct. And if sign B is correct, that means sign A is incorrect. This gives us two different options. So let's look at these options individually, starting with option 1. In option 1, sign A is correct, and sign B is incorrect. Let's start by looking at sign B. Sign B says, "This is the way to go." And since we're assuming sign B is incorrect, that means this is not the way to go. So the knight should not take this path. Now let's look at sign A. We assumed sign A is correct. And sign A says, "These signs are both false," meaning sign A and sign B are both false. Well, if sign B, which says this is not the way to go, is false, that means this is the way to go. And the knight should take this path. But let's look back at sign A. Sign A says these signs are both false. So if sign A is also false, that means only one of these signs is false. Notice how this creates a contradiction, similar to the one we looked at in the second choice of Mordin's maze, which you can see in the link in the description box below. So, since sign A presents a contradiction, this is not the correct option. So let's look at option 2 instead. In option 2, sign B is correct, and sign A is incorrect. So let's start by looking at sign B. Sign B says, this is the way to go. And since we assumed that it is correct, that means that the knight should take this path. Now let's look at sign A. Sign A says, these signs are both false. But remember, we assumed that sign A is incorrect. So if sign A is incorrect, then that means only one of these signs is false. Well, we already assumed that sign A is incorrect. And since this sign now says only one of these signs is false, we can assume that the other sign is correct. So, the knight should take this path. Be on the lookout for signs in Mordin's maze, such as sign A, that use words such as both, only, all, etc., as they usually present contradictions. So the knight decides to take path B. But